So over the past year, more or less, Ti's son King has been making a lot of waves across social media for like his different antics. Like the first time I started hearing about him and getting involved in all these antics was a few months ago, where he got into it. He made a scene at like a Waffle House and he was like disrespecting the employees there, and then also more recently, I guess he was beefing with like Charleston White or whatever. So he's definitely, I don't know if it's, I guess you can't even call it a rebellious stage. He's just we gonna get into that, but just basically recently he's going viral for arguing with his parents at like some, I think it was an Atlanta Falcons event. During their whole back and forth, his whole back and forth with his parents are saying, please stop acting like this. You're embarrassing everybody. You're not really like that. You grew up with a silver spoon. You grew up in, you grew up in like these rich neighborhoods and all that. Cause obviously you're T.I.'s son. And his argument against that was, nah, that's cap. I stand on business. I didn't really live in that house like that. I was living with my grandma, which I thought that his grandma was also living in her own mansion, a house, or whatever. But I don't know. Again, point is, they're trying to stop him from acting a fool and saying you're not really like that. We raised you in a great environment, and his response is basically saying, yes, I am like that. Y'all are capping for that reality show. I ain't we I wasn't really living in that house like that. Obviously, I'm more inclined to believe Ti and Tiny on this. Now, who knows? Could there be another side to this story where King actually spent most of his time living with like one of his relatives in like a more middle class section of Atlanta? Maybe, but I just highly doubt it. Of course. Now, Ti has a lot of kids. How many exactly? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But he has a lot of kids, and several of them have dived into music. They all do their own things. Like obviously, many people remember years ago, Zonique. She was like doing the girl group thing with the OMG girls during like the 2010s. Damani, he's releasing music right now, trying to carve out his own lane. And I actually think his music is pretty dope. Actually, Damani's music is actually pretty dope in my opinion. But then also his other son, Messiah, who I guess apparently goes by the stage name Buddy Red. He's kind of releasing kind of like a kind of like music that kind of sounds like a cross between like country and like folk music. But obviously, most notably, people are talking on social media about one of his younger sons, King, who, when you listen to his music, it has more of like a street aesthetic to it and more of a street vibe to it. He's talking a lot of tough talk. And obviously the music videos, the aesthetics in the music video kind of reinforce that sort of street image, which again, nobody really buys into because everybody's saying, hey man, we saw you on the reality show back in the day. You're the son of one of the most successful rappers ever. Like and also your mother was also in one of the more successful girl R&B groups of the 90s. So why is he acting like that? And obviously, I do agree partially. Like my opinion might kind of sound contradicting, but I do partially agree with that logic, obviously, because it's like, man, the hood is not hereditary. I remember years ago, I used to watch the show Power. I don't really, I've never watched any of the spinoffs of Power because I just didn't like the way Power ended. But years ago, I used to watch the show Power, and when you watch Tariq grew up in, they raised him in Tribeca. Like he grew up in the best possible environment, but at the end of the day, Tariq still went out of his way to turn into a hood rat. That's it just is what it is. Like it was weird watching it. And I remember I was saying to myself at the time, and I think it still applies to this situation. The hood is not hereditary, but sometimes some younger people who may be the kids of someone like Ti, they may treat it almost as if it is hereditary, to where again they sort of adopt that hood persona. But I will say though, even though the hood's not hereditary, hey, being like a crazy, irrational, hot-headed person, stuff like that probably could be hereditary. Because again, when you think about someone like Ti, you think about the antics Ti got into years ago. A lot of that stuff, beyond just being hood stuff, it's just a lot of it was just him just acting a fool, him just be doing irrational stuff like trying to swing on Floyd Mayweather. So maybe maybe King just looked up to Ti, and many people have brought this up, but we got to keep it in mind, right? Like maybe King just grew up looking up to Ti, and maybe because of that, a lot of Ti's worst traits that he would rather his son not have, it just may have just rubbed off on. It may have just rubbed off on King. Now, I also have another angle that I want to look at this from, and this is where I think a lot of people may misunderstand me and think I'm like contradicting myself, but I want people to definitely hear me out here. I'm not a big believer that people in hip hop have to have to actually live this lifestyle that they're talking about if they make it abundantly clear that this is just for entertainment purposes. Like when you saw the little Tekkas and the Slim Jesuses, Slim Jesus. When you saw the little Tekkas of the world and the Slim Jesuses, when you saw the little Tekkas of the world or like Slim Jesus a few years ago, when they were going viral and they had like that disclaimer at the beginning of their video saying these are all props. This is for entertainment purposes only. In my opinion, I think that was kind of ahead of its time. At the end of the day, a lot of people still in hip hop have this, in my opinion, this stupid concept in their head that you only could rap about what you know or what you are familiar with, what you've experienced. And I think in many ways that's holding the genre back because a lot of people are not being very creative. And so they're just kind of sticking to basic topics about stuff related to violence, stuff related to sex, stuff related to drugs, and not so much going into all the different realms of creativity and all these different lanes that may sound like borderline fantasy, but it would make for a good song. Like stuff I just feel like a lot of people aren't thinking outside of the box. And ironically, the only time they try to think out of the box is when they want to fake like a street image, which again, I'm not, the older I get, the less I get mad at people for trying to fake trying to sell a certain image, I guess is a better way to say it. But at the same time, I can't I can't I can't say like I don't understand why people have an issue with it because at the end of the day, part of what's bothering people with it is the fact that you're selling this image to all these people, and then these some of these people will be influenced by it and go make terrible decisions to throw their life away. Meanwhile, you've never done that or you are very far removed from that. But again, like I said, hey, I still think that people should have a right to start to explore creating actual like characters, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying these characters have to be street characters. I really don't think it's necessary. I think people should explore almost creating like alter egos, like on some like you know what I mean. Like I don't want to say like on some Ti and Tip type stuff, but I mean just like you know just think outside the box. It's easier said than done. Obviously, I understand, but I do feel like if people start to separate themselves in hip hop from the idea that you have to only rap about stuff around you and stuff that you know and stuff. Because as crazy as it sounds, right? Even though Ti's son most likely didn't grow up in the streets, guess what? He still grew up around he still grew up with a father who was constantly rapping about the streets, who most likely still has affiliates in one way or another involved in the streets. So as crazy as it sounds, there's still to some degree maybe some part of King that feels as though that is all he knows, right? Because if Ti's entourage is made up of like 90% people from the streets of Atlanta, and King was around them, in his head, he may feel like that just rubbed off on him, like it's almost in his DNA. So I mean, I don't know, man. I got to do a separate video on the idea of people in hip hop needing to let go of this concept of we have to make everything 100% real. Because I do believe if people let that go, just accept that it's only entertainment and embrace that idea instead of trying to shun people who try to embrace that idea, I think the genre would be pushed further a lot faster. Because when you look at other genres, for the most part, there's really no expectations for this to be stuff that they actually know or live through or have experience with. There's usually just them making songs. You have a few exceptions like the Taylor Swifts of the world where every time she does an album, everybody's trying to decode it and they feel as though, oh man, she just made a album about her ex she broke up with because she does this all the time and blah blah blah. But for the most part, in other genres, nobody really is expecting these people to be about this or do that. Like that's typically not the case. That's typically not the standard. Maybe to some degree people want that, but it's not the standard the way it is in hip hop where a lot of people feel as though you have to be this or you have to be that. But again, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but this is just an idea that I wanted to kind of just get out there. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. If you've listened this far, thank you. Let me know, how do you feel about T.I. and his son King? Do you feel like this is all staged so they could start a reality show, like a new reality show? Or do you feel as though this is actually really him trying to be rebellious and, act a fool? Do you feel like him King being this way is T.I.'s fault? Or do you feel like, King's son, T.I.'s son King is just simply a lost cause?